Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story unlike any you've heard, one of ancient memory, storied rituals, and a voice that never truly stopped singing. When Dr. Evelyn Moore traveled to a dying desert town to assess a disturbed man, she thought it would be just another case. But Dust Haven isn't just forgotten, it remembers. Relax, listen to the wind shift through the sand, and discover what happened when the chapel doors opened and the eye beneath the earth began to wake. I didn't hear the sound at first, I felt it, a kind of pressure just under the skin, like something writhing beneath the desert floor, too low for ears, but deep enough to make my molars throb. It came through the soles of my boots, traveled up my spine, and landed behind my eyes like a migraine wearing someone else's face. That was before I knew about the chapel with no door, before I found the photograph that hadn't been taken, before I realized they'd been waiting for me. My name is Dr. Evelyn Moore. I came to Dust Haven to assess a man who carved scripture into his own bones. I haven't left, and I don't think I can anymore. I arrived at noon, no clouds, no shade. The road had long since turned from asphalt to gravel, and then from gravel to silence. Dust Haven wasn't on any map I trusted. The GPS lost signal an hour before I reached the town limit. From that point on, I followed a photocopied sheet with handwritten arrows and coffee stains. The sign at the entrance read, Dust Haven, Est 1887, Redemption is in stillness. The last four words were painted and read over a weathered slogan beneath. Someone had tried to scrub away the old motto. You could still make out God bless this land if the light hit right. The land itself did not feel blessed. Flat, cracked earth stretched outward like dead skin, framed by black mesas and thorny ridges that growled the town like cattle. The air smelled of copper and scorched wood, though nothing burned. I remember thinking the landscape didn't feel empty, it felt suppressed. I parked beside the only building with intact windows, the sheriff's office. A single green fly landed on the dashboard. I swatted it. It vanished. Sheriff Atkins met me at the steps. He was gaunt, eyes shadowed despite the sun, with hands that never stopped twitching. You must be Dr. Moore, he said. You made good time. His tone didn't match the words. Yes, I said, extending my hand. I appreciate the town's cooperation. I was told the patient's condition required immediate forensic psychiatric review. Atkins didn't take my hand. He's not a patient. He's a ... preacher. Or was. Then what happened? He motioned for me to follow and led me inside without answering. The holding cell smelled of mildew, rust, and something sweetly rotten. He sat shirtless on the cot, back to me. White powder dusted his skin like ash. Not flour, not chalk, bone carved into his spine. Shoulder blades and ribs were precise lines of text Latin, some biblical, some not, scabbard over stigmata and deliberate ceremonial cuts. Self-inflicted, I asked. The sheriff nodded. Every damn one. I stepped closer. The man's breathing was slow, but his eyes were wide open, not blinking. Has he spoken? Not in words. What then? Sheriff Atkins hesitated. His voice was barely above a whisper. He sings sometimes, not any hymn I know. Sounds like sand moving under a door. I turned to the man on the cot. His lips twitched. Not a smile, not quite. My breath caught as I saw something in the corner of his cell, a small shape, hunched, watching. but when I turned my head to look at it directly, it was gone. I set up my temporary quarters in the back office of the town's mortuary. They had cleared a table, left me to mismatched chairs and an old tape recorder analog with fresh reels. The first night I dreamt I was walking in the desert barefoot. Something huge moved beneath the sand, tracking me without sound. When I looked behind, I saw only myself walking backwards, eyes sewn shut, mouthing prayers in a language I didn't understand. I woke up to the tape recorder playing on its own. The reel was blank, but the silence hissed like breath between teeth. The morning after my first session with the preacher, the air tasted wrong, not dusty wet, like breath on a cold mirror. Nothing in Dust Haven should smell like moisture, but there it was. A sickly dampness clung to my clothes as I stepped outside, though there hadn't been a drop of rain in weeks. Sheriff Atkins said the last rain was back in '07. He didn't specify which century. The townspeople moved with a hush, not reverent afraid. They glanced over their shoulders like they were walking through someone else's dream and didn't want to wake the dreamer. They watched me, not all at once, never directly, but always. I found Martha Jenkins on the porch of the general store, feeding seeds to birds that never landed. Dr. Moore, she said before I introduced myself, come to unbury what's better left beneath. Her hands trembled as she sprinkled feed onto the splintered railing. The birds didn't move, just shadows in her periphery. I'm here for a psychological assessment. The man in the cell, he's not the first. I'm sorry. Martha looked at me. Her eyes were pale, not blind, but thin, like fog glass. Dust Haven's got its ways. You're not from here. You don't understand 'em, but it don't matter. You walked in the door. That's permission. Permission for what? To be changed. She smiled then, not cruel, not kind, resigned, like someone remembering their own funeral. You'll see the door. They all do eventually. That afternoon I reviewed the preacher's medical records, what little there were. Name: Micah Payne, age 42. Occupation: pastor, independent ministry. History: no criminal record. Formerly employed as a chaplain, Zion Ridge, a rehabilitation center built atop the remains of a 1930s Dust-era sanitarium. That name pinged something in the back of my mind. Zion Ridge was shut down in 1979 after a state investigation into patient neglect and allegations of unlicensed experimental therapies. I found no surviving documentation. The land had been bought and sold through shell companies and Dust Haven. It didn't exist on any official land registry after 1983. Micah had carved the word sic transit corpus into his own thigh. I translated the Latin, so passes the body, a phrase used in esoteric funeral rites, burial without death. That evening, I visited the chapel. No one guided me, I just felt pulled. The building stood at the far edge of town, past the abandoned grain elevator and the half-buried pump station. The chapel had no steeple, no cross. Its wood was gray with age, dry as paper, but it didn't creak. It had no door, just an opening shaped like one. The inside was darker than it should have been. Even at sunset, I stepped in. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged. The floorboards didn't creak. They shuddered, like they didn't want to hold me. Inside was empty at first. Then the air shifted, and I saw them. Faint outlines, rows of seated figures, motionless, heads bowed, no eyes, no mouths, just impressions, like memory fossils pressed into time's dust. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. Then one of them raised its head. Its face was mine. And then I was back outside. No memory of moving. No time lost on my watch. But the sun was gone. That night I had the second dream. I was a little girl in a white dress, standing in a dry riverbed. My father alive, younger than I remembered him, was digging in the sand, muttering to himself, "Not deep enough, never deep enough." I asked what he was looking for. He didn't answer. Then he looked up, and it wasn't his face anymore. It was Micah Payne's, eyes weeping white ash, mouth sewn shut with thorns. He held out a book, but when I touched it, the pages bled. I woke, gasping. The tape recorder was running again. But this time the reel wasn't blank. A voice whispered in Latin, then in English. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Blood sings back to its root. You were always here. The next morning, Daniel Reed arrived, a journalist from Flagstaff, younger than me, too confident. Said he was here chasing ghost stories. Smiled like it was all just good content. He asked me for an interview. I told him no, but inside I was relieved. A rational mind, a second voice. Maybe I wasn't unraveling. Maybe. Daniel asked about Micah, the chapel, the strange behavior of the locals. I told him to leave. He didn't. And that was his first mistake. The day Daniel Reed arrived, the birds stopped flying. Not a single wing in the sky. No crows, no sparrows, not even buzzards. The air above Dust Haven held perfectly still, like it too was listening. He showed up with a drone, a handheld recorder, and a grin like he thought the desert owed him answers. "What's it like?" he asked me, being the only person in a dying town who still believes in sanity. I didn't answer. We walked the town's perimeter that afternoon. Daniel kept asking questions. I mostly listened. Listening had become dangerous lately. The more I heard, the more the world shifted. Like everything was a riddle, and solving it would unravel whatever thread held reality together. "I've been reading about this place," he said. It was originally a water station for cattle trails, then turned into a Pentecostal mission. Heard anything about the faith of the Veil? I stopped walking. "Where did you hear that?" "Old ledger in a museum in Flagstaff. The curator said the Veil folks were a kind of isolationist sect, no known founder. No theology outside of blood purification and dream fasting. The group vanished in the 1930s during a dust storm, literally disappeared. Some folks think they're still here, underground." "You think there's a secret cult running a ghost town?" I asked. He smiled again. "No, I think you know more than you're saying." That night I returned to the chapel. I didn't mean to. My body took me there like it was remembering something I hadn't lived. The building looked the same, no door, no windows, but now something had been etched into the wood around the frame. Cantate sanguinum, sing the blood. Inside, the pews were gone. Instead, a circle of stones, bones arranged in a pattern I didn't understand, familiar, but wrong, like a forgotten song hummed off-key. In the center was an old phonograph, untouched by dust. I don't remember walking to it, but I remember the sound it made when the needle dropped. A heartbeat, slowed, distorted, echoing, and over it, a child's voice sang a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was 7. My father used to hum it when he drank too much, except I'd long since convinced myself I'd imagined that the melody was off, descending chromatically into something not music, just remembrance wearing melody like skin. When I left the chapel, I saw someone standing by the fence, Martha Jenkins, except she wasn't looking at me. She was looking up. I followed her gaze. The sky looked wrong, not darker, deeper, like staring into a pond and seeing stars beneath the water. I was 6 when they first sang it, Martha said, not turning. My sister bled for 3 days after. That's how they know you're chosen. Dust mixed with blood. The earth drinks it. What are they? I asked. She didn't answer. She just whispered, you'll know when you wake up underground. The next morning, Daniel was gone. His drone sat broken on the steps of the sheriff's office. His gear was untouched. His phone showed photos from the chapel images that should have been impossible. In one, I was standing in the center of the chapel, eyes rolled back, arms outstretched, bones in my hands, smiling, but I'd never posed for the photo. I wasn't even there at the time it was taken. Sheriff Atkins refused to help. He left, he said. City boy couldn't handle the quiet. Happens. He left all his stuff, I said. Maybe he didn't want to take Dust Haven with him. I felt something in that moment. Not hostility, not apathy, complicity. The night after Daniel disappeared, I dreamt I was buried, not suffocating, just lying there, underground, wrapped in linen and whispers. I could hear voices above me, soft and rhythmic, praying, chanting, no, singing, blood to bone, dust to dust. Wake the child, forget the trust. I tried to scream, but my mouth was full of earth. I woke with dirt under my nails. My boots were muddy, the bed not mine. I was in a house I didn't recognize. Photographs on the wall. Me, as a child, standing next to a woman I didn't know. The photo was old sepia toned, but the woman looked exactly like me. On the back, a handwritten note. Evelyn, keep her from the door. She dreams too loud by the time the sun rose. I wasn't sure if it ever had. The house I woke up in was gone. Not abandoned, erased. I drove back later that day, trying to find a crumbling white porch and the wine chime of bone I remembered hanging by the door. But there was nothing where it had been, just dried weeds and a patch of scorched earth shaped almost, but not exactly, like a foundation. I checked the photograph again, the one from the wall, the one with my face as a child, standing next to a woman who looked like my own reflection in older skin. The picture was now in black and white. The ink on the back had changed. It now read, "They never let her leave the first time." I went to the town library next, if it could even be called that. A single room above the old schoolhouse, dusty ledgers, curled newspapers, a rusted microfiche reader that sparked when I plugged it in. I found a box labeled Zion Ridge Confidential beneath a tarp under the stairs. Inside, therapy records, scribble transcripts, Polaroids to warp to recognize. Most were redacted. Black bars across names, dates, entire pages. But a few phrases escaped the censors. Observed communion and total sensory deprivation. Spoke the cradle tongue without prior exposure. Subject 12 insists the chapel sings during sleep cycle. She drew the eye again, this time with the mouth open, at the bottom of the box, folded into a manila envelope, a case file. My father's name was on it, Moore, A.L.A.N. Chaplain, Field Monitor. Assignment: Dream Repression Trials. Cohort D. Typed notes. Subject D7 has shown disturbing persistence in cross-generational imagery. His daughter is beginning to draw the same sigils. Recommend relocation or integration before pattern becomes self-sustaining. Integration. They weren't treating people. They were planting them. I confronted Sheriff Atkins. His office smelled of coffee and gasoline. The fan above his head spun in slow, uneven jerks. You knew, I said, my father worked for Zion Ridge. He didn't look surprised, didn't deny it. You think you came here by choice, he said. You're here because it's time. Time for what? He leaned forward, his voice low. This land remembers Dr. Moore. It doesn't forget the blood it sowed. Your father tried to leave it buried, but the earth cracks. Always does. I stared at him. And then I asked something I hadn't meant to say. Where's my mother? He looked at me with something between pity and dread. You've already met her. You just don't remember. I walked the perimeter of town again. Found myself outside the abandoned train depot, a place I hadn't visited yet but knew somehow. Every board in its walls creaked like it was breathing through ribs. Inside, I found a second phonograph. Same model, same warped needle, except this one was already spinning. No power source, no wind-up key. Just spinning. The song this time was slower, and behind the melody, whispers layered like sediment. I leaned in to listen. My name was spoken once, twice, 7 times, and then I heard Daniel's voice. He was crying, whispering a prayer. Please don't let her open it. Please don't let her see the door. And then the sound of digging. Wet, desperate digging. I staggered back. The phonograph needle snapped off, and something knocked from beneath the floorboards. That night I had the third dream. I was tied to a wooden chair in the chapel, facing a wall that pulsed like it was made of skin. In front of me, a mirror. In it, my reflection moved independently, smiling, whispering things I couldn't hear. Behind me, figures gathered, robed, faceless. One placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "The voice you call your own was always ours." Then it pressed something cold into my palm, a piece of bone, carved with the symbol I now found everywhere, the eye, mouth open, weeping dust. I woke, clutching something. It was there, still in my hand. I didn't decide to return to the chapel. My feet did. It was nearly midnight when I found myself standing at its threshold again, dust crawling up my ankles like fingers in a grave. The chapel had changed. Not visibly, no architectural shift, but something in its angle to the land was wrong, crooked, tilted, like the world had turned slightly and the chapel hadn't rotated with it. The doorway was darker than the night around it. The air inside, thick with a scent I couldn't place, burnt feathers and copper. The circle of bones was gone. In its place, floorboards pried up in a crude square, a pit, unlit, shallow at first glance. But that wasn't depth, it was deception. The blackness moved. Something had been buried here, or born. I climbed down. Every instinct in me resisted. My fingers trembled as I gripped the broken boards. I felt watched, not by a person but by expectation, as if the very space was waiting for me to reach the bottom. The pit was only 10 feet deep, but I swear to you it took an hour to reach the ground. Every breath pulled harder. Every step down felt like losing a memory. At the bottom, a circle carved into the packed dirt. At the center, a human tooth, still bloody, beside it, scratched into the earth in childlike handwriting. The key is not a door, it's a forgetting. When I emerged, the chapel was gone, the night had shifted. I was in the desert again, but not the one I remembered. The mesas loomed closer, like they'd stepped forward while I was underground. The sky above me pulsed red around the edges. Stars flickered and vanished mid-twinkle. I walked until I saw lights. It was the sheriff's office, but lit from within. Candles burned in all the windows. The doors were open. Inside, Sheriff Atkins was kneeling on the floor. He was singing, not to anyone in the room, but to the bones scattered in front of him. Small bones, child-sized, each arranged in concentric circles, like a spiral opening inward. He didn't see me at first. His eyes were rolled back, mouth slack. The song was not in English, not Latin either, something older, something shaped for throat and dirt. I said his name, he froze, and then not slowly he turned his head toward me, fast and wrong, like his neck had no bones left in it. "She's almost through," he said. "Who? You?" I ran. I don't remember reaching the edge of town, but I found myself outside the mortuary again. Its door stood open, though I'd locked it that morning. Inside, silence, and then a faint ticking. I followed the sound to the back room. The tape recorder was spinning. A reel I'd never loaded played. The voice was my own, breathless, panicked. "This is Dr. Evelyn Moore. If anyone finds this, I know God, this isn't a case. This is I think I've been here before. I think I was born here. I think I never left. It's not a place. It's a memory, and it remembers back." I opened the drawer where I kept my files. Inside, a single item, a map drawn in black ink. Shaky lines, hastily sketched, dot at the center, a symbol I now recognized. The eye, mouth open, but now weeping teeth beneath it, in tiny script. The Vale Pit, returning site, 1935. That name again, the Vale Pit. I remembered seeing it in Zion Ridge's files, barely legible in redacted margins. A mass returning, volunteers and children taken down into an underground chamber. Most never came back. Some who did could no longer speak. Some never stopped. At dawn, I visited Martha Jenkins one last time. She was sitting exactly where I had first seen her, feeding the birds that weren't there. "They're waking her, you know," she said. "Who?" "The one under, the one they put in the ground to keep her from remembering. But dust doesn't die, it waits." I sat beside her. My hand shook. Was I born here? Martha smiled gently. "You were buried here." The map led me east of Dust Haven, past the ridge where old mining carts lay rusted like skeletons in shallow graves. I followed a dry creek bed choked with bone-colored sagebrush, the air around me growing still to still, as if even the wind had agreed not to speak of what lay ahead. The Vale Pit was not marked by signs or fences, just a shift in the terrain where red rock became white salt, where the horizon seemed to bow inward, as if the land itself had been cracked open and stitched shut again badly. I stood at the edge for what felt like hours, a sinkhole 30 feet wide, ringed in stone, ancient, but not eroded, too perfect to be natural. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my own breath and something beneath it. Not a voice, not quite, more like a rhythm. the slow inhalation of something enormous. I climbed down. The salt was soft beneath my boots, crunching under each step like frost. The walls were slick with black mineral veins that looked disturbingly like old veins in flesh. About halfway down, I began to see handprints pressed into the wall, some large, some child-sized, not painted and pressed, as if bodies had once passed through the salt, melting into it. At the bottom, I found an archway carved in the stone above it. The eye again, this time closed below it, an inscription. The mind is a vessel, memory is a virus, sing to empty it, inside, darkness breathed. I don't remember lighting my flashlight, but the beam shone ahead narrow and trembling, revealing a tunnel that curved in slow, impossible ways. I moved forward, guided by instinct, by dread, by something behind my ribs that pulsed in time with the silence. Eventually, I reached a chamber, circular, low ceiling, walls covered in carving symbols I could barely process, spirals, teeth, eyes, hands, and mouths in endless patterns, many mouths all open. In the center of the chamber lay a small cot, buckled, rusted. Beside it, Daniel's recorder still running. I pressed play. His voice crackled through static, shaky, fractured. I followed her down. Evelyn, except she's not Evelyn. Not anymore. This place it wants her. She hears it. She repeats the song in her sleep. Time doesn't work here. I saw my own shadow leave before I turned the corner. There's something in the salt. It remembers us. My name is Daniel Reed. If anyone hears this, don't look at the eye when it opens. It shows you who you were before birth, and who you have to become, then silence, then my voice. It's inside me now. I think it always was. I dropped the recorder. I didn't mean to. My hand just let go. I turned to the wall behind me, drawn without decision. There, carved deeper than the others, was a symbol I hadn't seen before. The eye split down the middle, a single word beneath it. Not Latin, not English, but I knew it. Morith, not a name, a hunger given shape. Then the wall shifted, stone shivered. A seam opened down its center from inside, not air, but scent familiar and foul. Milk gone sour, metal under skin, dust soaked in grief. And then a sound, footsteps, soft, bare, approaching. I should have run. I didn't. A hand slid out of the opening, pale, childlike, fingers stitched together with salt thread. Another hand followed, and then the face. Not monstrous, not alien, mine, but younger, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide with terror. She pointed behind me. I turned. A figure stood in the corner. A woman in black, face obscured by a lace veil that shifted like smoke. Her voice filled the chamber without sound. Asterisk, asterisk, return to me, my voice. You were always borrowed. Asterisk, asterisk. Then everything went black. I woke up in my cot, back in the mortuary, daylight through the blinds, air dry, normal, except for the map. It now showed to pit sites, and the second one was marked. The returning final song pending. Underneath, someone had written a date, tomorrow at dawn. The town rang with silence. No dogs barking, no engines, no human voice. The only sound was the wind threading through the empty buildings like a breath through dying lungs. It carried the smell of salt and blood faint, like a memory returned too soon. On every door in town, someone had painted the same phrase in black ash, we become when she remembers. The letters were smeared, not written, pressed. As if inked by hands not quite human, I tried to leave. I got as far as the ridge road before the sky changed. It didn't darken, it inverted. Clouds bled upward. The sun bent slightly left, shimmering like heat off a corpse. My truck engine stalled. The road behind me was gone. Literally not just vanished, but folded, like someone had rolled the earth inward and left only blank stone and dust. I opened the glove box. My ID was missing. My phone was dead. And in its place, a cassette tape labeled in black marker, Murmur, a final testament. I drove back on foot. The town watched without eyes. People stood in doorways, silent, still, dust coating their skin like burial shrouds. They didn't move, didn't blink, but their mouths were open, just enough to let something inside. In the town square, the preacher was back. Micah Payne, naked to the waist, body etched deeper with script than before. Some of the wounds were open again, fresh, bleeding ash. He was preaching, but there were no words, just a hum, a rhythm, the sound of something ancient waiting to be remembered. I played the tape. My father's voice crackled from player, tired, afraid. They told us it was therapy, that we were helping them forget, but they lie. The rituals were never meant to erase. They were meant to bury memory deep enough to grow. Your mother knew. That's why they took her first. Evelyn, if you're hearing this, you weren't born in Los Alamos. You weren't adopted. You were chosen. They fed you songs in your sleep. You don't remember, but your bones do. That's why the eye opened in you. Then silence. Then, faintly, my own voice as a child, singing the same lullaby from the dream, only now I remembered the words. That night I returned to the chapel for the final time. The pit was sealed, dot in its place, a stone altar, surrounded by townspeople on their knees, humming the cadence of the returning. No drums, no fire, just rhythm, mouths open, but sound coming from somewhere else. Micah stood atop the altar. He raised his hands. The crowd stopped humming. And then they spoke, in unison. The body forgets, the voice remembers. The dust will breathe again. He turned to me. Evelyn, he said, you may speak. I opened my mouth to protest. But what came out wasn't English or Latin. It wasn't even sound. It was memory of fields burning in the dust bowl, of a girl buried alive under the veil of ritual, of a chapel deeper than earth, stitched from bone and silence, of voices sewn shut so their songs could echo longer, and somewhere in it my voice. I fell to my knees, not from pain, from understanding. There was no cult, no conspiracy, not anymore, just inheritance. Memory passed like a disease. The ritual wasn't summoning something. It was releasing what had been sealed in me. I was the chorus, the altar, the last verse. And then the eye opened in the sky, a black iris against a red horizon, and we remembered. I woke in 3 places at once, on the chapel floor, in my childhood bedroom, untouched by time, and beneath the veil pit, where the earth still pulsed with teeth. My body was in Dust Haven, but my mind ran across seams in time, slipping like fingers through torn fabric. Each version of me knew something the others didn't. Each was beginning to hum. In town, the rules had changed. People moved like they remembered different laws of motion, jerky, hesitant, then to fluid. The streets bore fresh symbols in the dust, drawn with hands that couldn't have held chalk. Children whispered in languages no one taught them. The sky blinked, and a woman I'd seen die on my second day walked past me, smiling faintly, her eyes filled with stars and salt. I returned to the sheriff's office. Inside, the walls were lined with pages from notebooks torn, yellowing, fluttering in a whine that didn't exist. Each page was covered in the same phrase, repeated in shaky ink, "Memory sings backward." On the desk sat a file folder labeled Project Veil. Vocal trauma research -1977. Inside, photographs of the chapel before the pit opened. A list of voice carriers selected from the children of former cult members. A transcript of a failed ritual in 1935. A sketch of the veil sigil with annotations. "Do not look when it breathes," and a redacted letter only to lines visible. Subject E. Moore has responded to the cradle hymn. Her memory blocks are thinning. Prepare the town. I went to see Martha Jenkins again, but her house was empty. No, the frame was there, but the house inside it had been hollowed, like a shell left behind after something had molted. On the kitchen table, a Polaroid recent of me, standing in the chapel, arms raised behind me, dozens of figures in robes. None of them had faces, just smooth skin. I returned to the mortuary. It no longer held my things, not even the walls. The building had been rebuilt, wrong dimensions, slightly off, windows missing, angles subtly inhuman. Inside, I found Daniel's tape recorder, still running, his voice distorted by time and dust. I followed the preacher down, but I was too late. The hour was open. She was singing again, Evelyn, but it wasn't just her voice. It was all of them. I saw her split into three. One remembered, one denied, and one. One never stopped dreaming. Don't let her finish the song. I don't remember how I ended up back at the chapel, but I was there, and they were waiting. The entire town, silent, ringed around the altar, each holding something different. A tooth, a lock of hair, a bone, still red, a photo that hadn't been taken yet. Micah Payne stepped forward, eyes full of dust and flame. "You were always the chorus, Evelyn," he said. "You just forgot the melody." I shook my head. "I didn't ask for this," he smiled. "No one asks to be born." The chapel shifted, walls dissolved. We were underground again. The altar moved beneath us like a heart in rhythm. I heard my father's voice, but not from outside, from inside my own skull. It was always about the voice. They needed a carrier, a vessel shaped in forgetting. "Evelyn, you're not cursed. You're the hymn they buried in skin." And then I felt it. The eye opening again, this time inside me. Not painful, just true. Every lie I told myself about who I was, what I'd survived, what I'd forgotten, they all burned away in one perfect, blinding note. I began to hum, and the town answered. I don't sleep anymore. I close my eyes and wake deeper each time. The world rearranges itself slightly, subtle things vanish. The sun no longer rises from the same direction. Roads that once curved now spiral. People greet me by name who should not know it. Dust Haven is remembering itself faster than I can forget. I tried again to record my thoughts. I hit play and heard someone else's voice, a woman. Calm, familiar, she said, "The signal is almost ready." She stabilized, resonance confirmed. Project Veil phase 2 begins at dusk. I found Sheriff Atkins sitting alone in the schoolhouse. The children were gone. The desks were filled with stone dolls, each with their mouths sewn shut. He looked at me with guilt, not surprise. They thought the experiment failed, he said, back in '79, but the town kept the rhythm going, quiet like carried it forward, fed it when needed. You're talking about me. You were born here, Evelyn, not in flesh, in song. They sang you into the dirt. Your father was supposed to stop it. Instead, he broke the seal early. That's why you splintered. What seal? He pointed to the sky. It had begun to pulse again, red, wet-looking. That's not a sun, he said. It's an eye. It only looks like a sun when it's closed. I left him there, humming to the dolls. On the way out, I found another photograph pinned to the doorframe. It showed a group of doctors in 1977 standing outside the chapel before the first pit opened. In the center, my father, and beside him a woman in a hospital gown, pregnant. The caption written on the back, subject he, carrier viability confirmed. Remembering scheduled for 2 to 5. This wasn't a cult, it was a laboratory, and I was the experiment they buried alive. The Vale pit reopened that evening, no storm, no quake, just a soft collapse, like the earth finally exhaling after holding its breath for 50 years. The town gathered in silence. No fire, no speech, just alignment. I stood at the edge, waiting for panic, denial, resistance. But there was none left. My body hummed. My mind unraveled and looped back. I remembered singing the song they said I dreamed. I remembered the words they said I imagined. I remembered being lowered into the earth while they chanted, "She carries the dust, she carries the name, mooreth, awaken." The vessel remains, the descent was smooth. I walked into the Vale pit, not as a visitor, but as a returned part. The air was colder this time. The salt walls pulsed with heat, and the voices greeted me not with language, but recognition. They spoke as one thought. It took so long for you to become audible. At the bottom, the chamber had changed again. Now it resembled a laboratory, a fusion of ritual and science. An altar of stone wired with cables, sigils painted over circuit boards, oscilloscopes blinking in rhythm with breath, and in the center, the cradle, a sarcophagus, flesh-wrapped, bone-reinforced. Inside it, me, or the version of me that stayed asleep, my face pale, eyes stitched shut with salt thread, hands bound in prayer, and on her chest an instrument, neither machine nor relic. It pulsed, it heard me. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I saw the final words scrawled on the wall behind the cradle. She was never meant to wake alone. The altar lights turned on. A tone began, deep, warm, ancient. I felt it in my teeth first, then in my spine. The eye above the pit opened wider. Not in the sky inside, every person watching. And suddenly, I was no longer just Evelyn. I was the girl in the dirt, the carrier in the clinic, the song in the mouth of every townsperson, the signal waiting to be sent. I opened my arms. The crowd fell to their knees. I began to speak the hymn, and the sky answered. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the walls began to inhale for me. The ritual wasn't a moment. It was a frequency, a pitch that bypassed language, that rewrote self in favor of signal. Above the Vale pit, the town stood perfectly still, not frozen, just waiting, like actors pause between scenes, cueing off something unheard. The chapel bell, long silent, began to toll, only there was no bell. The sound came from underneath us, echoed through the bones in the salt. The sarcophagus, the other me, began to move. No breath, no pulse, just a soft tilt of the head. Like a phonograph needle finding the groove, her eyes opened, still stitched shut, but her mouth moved. She who remembers ... becomes. The chamber responded, walls rippled. Lights blinked in time signatures, the circuit boards sparked, and the sigils ignited with flame that didn't burn. The altar began to sing back, a low, seismic tone, and then I understood. This wasn't about worship. It wasn't even about power. It was communication, a transmission buried in the human mind, encoded in ritual, unlocked by grief, silence, and forgetting. We were never meant to know it, only to carry it. I took a step forward. The other me raised her hand in mimicry. I whispered, if I finish the song, what happens? And the voice inside answered, not in sound, but in truth. Everything that remembers you must also wake. I saw flashes, cities emptying, oceans flattening to glass, children humming in languages their parents couldn't hear, machines stuttering, then echoing human laughter. The song wasn't a message. It was a reboot, a call to collapse this version of reality into the one beneath it. Then I saw Daniel standing just inside the chamber, pale, shaking, one arm wrapped in bandages, the other pointing a revolver at the cradle. Don't finish it, he said. Daniel, that's not you in there, he hissed. It's what they buried in you, the hymn, the virus. You are not a transmission. I looked at him, and I looked at her, the girl in the cradle, eyes stitched shut, mouth open, waiting. If I kill it, you come back, the world stays wrong. But you come back. I stepped toward him and said, you don't understand. I never left. I've just been quiet. Now I remember the words. He raised the gun, tears in his eyes, and I began to sing, not in protest, not in defiance. In remembrance, the hymn poured out, a song of ash, breath, stone, and blood, a melody older than fear, sharper than truth. The chamber shook, the sky outside split, and then I stopped, mid-note, not because I was interrupted, but because I chose to. I looked Daniel in the eyes and whispered, let me be both. I walked to the cradle, laid my hands on the chest of the other me, felt her shudder, felt her vanish. She dissolved not in smoke, not in light, but in memory, and made like a forgotten word. The signal stopped, the walls dim above us. The eye blinked once and closed. Outside, Dust Haven fell quiet. People began to stir again, not blank, not restored, just human, confused, fractured, free for now. I left the pit in silence. Daniel followed, still shaken. You stopped it, he said. I nodded. I postponed it. What was it? I paused, then answered. A signal, and I was the speaker, but I rewrote the ending. 3 days after the returning, it rained. The first time in Dust Haven in nearly 2 decades. No thunder, no lightning, just a soft, steady fall, as if the sky had wept itself numb. The streets smell like rust and cedar. Windows opened for the first time in years. The chapel doors, long imagined, had reappeared, hinged shut, and no one dared enter. People began to forget, not all at once, not completely, but in layers. Names dissolved from newspapers, Photographs change. Martha Jenkins no longer remembered what her sister looked like. Sheriff Atkins stopped humming and stopped speaking. They smiled again, they laughed, they rebuilt. But when I asked them about the pit, they only blinked, confused, then concerned for me. What pit? They asked. Daniel left on the fourth morning. Didn't say goodbye. He left a note, 3 words scrawled in charcoal on a blank cassette tape. You rewrote gravity. I found the bullet he'd never fired tucked into the glove box. It was warm. I stayed. Not because I had to, because I could no longer pretend the rest of the world was any different. Dust Haven was just first. The other towns, the ones whose names change on maps, they're next. Places where roads don't end but vanish. Where kids speak in dreams they don't remember. Where the ground hums when no one listens. I no longer dream in linear time. My nightmares come in fractured vignettes. A version of me with no eyes but too many mouths, humming through teeth not mine. Children burying cassette tapes in sand and calling it prayer. Machines blinking Morse code no one taught them, always spelling one name. Morith, I don't write anymore, I record. I speak the memories into reels and lock them away. Some mornings I find them re-recorded, my voice layered with another, lower, older, telling me things I haven't done yet. The government came 2 weeks later. No sirens, no force, just a man in a gray suit and a woman in a windbreaker who smelled like bleach and metal. They took no notes. They asked no questions. They looked at the chapel, at the pit, at the salt-crusted stones, and then they said the strangest thing, you did it manually. We weren't sure that was still possible. Then they left. No signatures, no warnings, no conclusions. Yesterday I heard a child singing in the Dust Haven clinic, soft, innocent, the cradle hymn. Only she changed the last note. She inverted it. And something in my blood moved. I smiled, not from joy, from certainty. The song was not over, only paused. I held breath in the throat of a sleeping voice. I am Evelyn Moore. I am a doctor, a daughter, a signal. I did not destroy the eye. I learned to close it, and when the world is ready again, when it forgets enough to become vulnerable, I will sing, but not to end it, to help it remember what it used to be before the silence.